What's up, welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Wicked Part 1, the musical fantasy film adaptation of the long-running Wizard of Oz prequel musical that debuted on Broadway over 20 years ago after being adapted from a 90s book. The Wizard of Oz, obviously one of the most famous and most widely seen films in the history of the world, and Wicked, to its credit when it came out, again, a long time ago at this point, Wicked is one of the best examples of a prequel actually adding to its property and showing you something new and having its own worth in its own regard and not just being a example of diminishing returns. I've seen the original Wicked play back in 2017 in London, liked it quite a bit, and Wicked Part 1 is going to be a massive movie, one of the biggest movies of the year, at least in the United States. It remains to be seen how big it's going to be overseas because the Wicked musical has, I think, awareness that waxes and wanes depending on where you are in the world. But either way, it's going to be a big movie, and it makes sense, just all the pieces coming together in this big way. John M. Chu, the director, hardly any slouch, a great choice to be frank. Of course, recently made In the Heights, also Step Up 3D. He knows his way around a musical. Of course, really, I think, breaking out in a blockbuster sense with Crazy Rich Asians back in 2018. And this film is expertly cast. Its two stars are Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. Cynthia Erivo, thespian, Tony winner, amazing singer, great actor as well. Ariana Grande, amazing singer, that much is obvious, and someone who, of course, comes from the Disney background, has shown great comedic chops on Saturday Night Live on more than one occasion, and is perhaps a bit of an untapped reservoir when it comes to being an on-screen acting presence. I thought Wicked Part 1 was a lot of fun. It's basically everything you come to expect from a Wicked film adaptation. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are both excellent. We know how good of a singer both of them are. Grande is able to steal the movie in many respects because she's able to have this comedic lean to her portrayal of Glinda. Erivo has a harder role playing Elphaba, but also does quite a good job. The message of Wicked has never been subtle, but I think for the grandeur, pomp, and circumstance that you expect from a big, high-flying musical, this film delivers it. I think John Chu's saturated style visually actually works pretty well, and despite the fact this movie has plenty of CGI, I think overall it looks good. Now, that might not be for everyone. This movie is certainly a lot visually, and it's also just a lot plot-wise. The movie is over 2.5 hours long, and of course it's only the first act of the Wicked musical. But if that's what you're into, this movie is very much giving you what you want. If you think about like the characters in Wicked, right? Erivo's Elphaba, Grande's Glinda, they're, I don't want to call them archetypical, but Elphaba, especially in the Wicked musical, is not the most like sophisticated character arc per se. It's pretty standard, like ostracized character, gets pushed towards being villainized, and in general, the overall message of this film and this play, again, kind of obvious, kind of beats you over the head with its messaging, but it is familiar to this day. Of course, the rise of fascist tendencies, in this case, the titular Wizard of Oz, and his desire to control and, quote, give the people an enemy, making things easier and whatnot. There's familiar beats today when you watch the story of Wicked, the same way there was when the play came out. However, you don't really have to even lock into the greater message that Wicked's about, just because I think it's a really fun time. In general, I liked the musical numbers throughout the film. I would say it's obvious that the best song in Wicked is Defying Gravity, which is the, kind of show-stopping ending musical number at the end of Act 1 on stage and at the end of this film, for Part 1. And apart from that, I think there's plenty of other good ones. Popular comes to mind, but I think the film is constructed in such a way that you have, the greater ensemble on screen, the fellow Oz students and whatnot at the university that Elphaba and Glinda meet at. They kind of fill out the screen and the sound of the movie, and that works well. And then because Erivo and Grande can really soar, the songs are able to really, really flourish. I think when Erivo and Grande harmonize together, I wish we got more of it, to be honest. When they do harmonize, it's tremendous just because the range is tremendous. It's so good. And Ariana, I think her performance is really fun because she adds a lot of these flourishes with her voice, hitting high notes and just being super extra. And she's so great at doing that, and it makes the performance a lot of fun. We've known she's had comedic chops from SNL, but like it was really on full display with this. I thought she was just really, really great in the role. One of her underlings is played by Bowen Yang, also like a great piece of like subtle like supporting casting, just because Bowen Yang from SNL can very easily like do side eye and one liners and ad libs and stuff, and there's a lot of I think really funny little bits of humor littered throughout the movie when we're in between musical numbers. It's also interesting to just think about Wicked in a meta sense, because movie musicals have hardly been successful at the box office lately. Think of recent bombs like Dear Evan Hansen or even John M. Chu's In the Heights, which was excellent but did not perform well during the pandemic box office. It's been a bit of tough sledding recently, but the awareness with Wicked has been so huge, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think Ariana Grande's star power has a lot to do with that. And it's actually funny to think about this in a certain sense, being a more significant part of her career this year than her last album, Eternal Sunshine, was. An album that I liked, but was not as popular or as mainstream as her past works, funny enough. If there's any like quibbles to take with Wicked Part 1, I'd say the metaphor of the rise of fascism and whatnot. In this case, it's like the silencing of animals that have the ability to speak in the world of Oz, but that's going away as the wizard is trying to get rid of this dissent and whatnot. It's a bit on the nose. I think Peter Dinklage's voice performance as Dr. Dillamond, this goat professor at Shiz University, is pretty strong. They're not introduced as villains, but the ostensible villains of the film, the wizard, played by Jeff Goldblum, small role, and then also his underling slash collaborator, who's also like the head of the university, played by Michelle Yeoh. Obviously, those are great presences. We know them well. They're familiar. We should also note Ethan Slater, who plays one of the Munchkins, Bogue Woodsman, who's in love with Glinda. Of course, Ethan Slater was in a relationship with Ariana Grande during the production of this film. A lot of tabloid attention was factored in with that. That being said, I think for his role, again, supporting role, he does a good job with the film. I also quite enjoyed Jonathan Bailey as Fiyero, the prince whom they encounter at school. He's obviously a dashing, conventionally handsome man, but I thought he was also pretty charming and did a good job of holding the screen alongside Erivo and Ariana. Not unexpected, but there's a great cameo from Idina Menzel and Christian Chenoweth in the film. Of course, they are the original Elphaba and Glinda on Broadway, 20 plus years ago. It's fun to see them. In my theater, there was actually some big claps when they showed up from obviously a big fan of the musical. If anything, I'm curious what part 2 is able to do, because the Wicked Act 2 on stage is a lot shorter than Act 1, and we got a lot of the musical in this first, in this part 1 as a film. We got basically all of Act 1, right? And they even added to it. That's why it's so long. But they're going to have to add more for, part 2 the film to come together completely. So I think we'll get some original songs created for part 2, which is of course coming out in a year's time. And along those lines, Defying Gravity, as performed by Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, is not eligible for Academy Award for Best Original Song because it is not, in fact, an original song, as we know. That being said, I think the performance was good. Will we hear if the Oscars performed anyway? Perhaps. We'll see if they change any rules regarding that. But I think Wicked's going to be big, and it's, I think, justly earned a lot of critical praise. Again, you're couching it as it's a big bombastic musical, but as far as big bombastic musicals go, this one was quite good and basically did everything it set out to do. And also, I think it ends in a very acceptable, self-contained manner, despite the fact that it's clearly still a part 1. So very satisfied with how Wicked Part 1 went. Now I'm just curious to see how big can this movie get, how big will it be overseas. Time will tell. And of course, make sure you're supporting the other part of Wicked this weekend and seeing Gladiator 2. But let me know, what was your favorite moment of Wicked? What do you want to see next in Part 2? And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.